for formatting, mechanics, and style. And this is the part of the podcast where we talk about the specific formatting that each screenwriter uses, how they teach us to read their own individual screenplays, and how each screenplay is a little different. And of course, Sorkin has his own style. And we start with Sorkin's tremendous use of transitions for every single scene. This goes back, used to be the standard back in the day. You'd see this in all screenplays. Nowadays, you don't see it as much. Transitions are mostly used to be very specific about a visual, cinematic look that you're trying to get on the page. But he uses it every scene. The cut to, if it's just a standard scene, he's just saying cut to, cut to. Part of why the screenplay is 163 pages, if you took all the transitions out, I expect you probably could gain 6 to 8 pages just doing that alone. But I mean, it doesn't really matter what his screenplay comes in at. So 137 times we have cut to, 19 times we have cut back to. Of course, we also have the fade in and the fade out. We have intercuts. On 20, we have a pre-lap, which this is what I was talking about earlier. You would see this quite a bit in more modern screenplays. This is a way, if, as a writer, you want to show, look, we want to start with a sound, a sequence before we actually see it. You would pre-lap that. He does that one time here. Another thing he does that is unique is that he capitalizes the names of characters every time that they show up in the screenplay, not just the first time. So throughout the screenplay, every action line, if a character is mentioned, capitalize. And we have another screenwriter that did that on a screenplay that we broke down here. Do you remember who that is? Robert Eggers is a screenwriter who does that quite a bit. Sticking with character names, another unique trait of Aaron Sorkin is that sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes if he wants to give a name to a character, but they're really minor, they're not someone that you need to remember, especially in a story that has a lot of characters, you don't want to confuse the reader, he will put their names in brackets on the character tag. Good example of that's on 115, where we have the interns here. Out of the respect of the actor, we've talked about this many times on the podcast. If you can, it's always nice to give a character a name, just so that on their IMDb, on their credit, they'll be a person rather than intern or bartender, right? So here he does it. We see here that the two interns, it says intern brackets Eric. And then the other intern talks and it says intern brackets Ian. And there are many ways to do this. Most screenwriters probably just put intern 1, intern 2, and don't worry about it. But if you're being nice and you want to give people names, there are ways to do it. Jordan Peele does it a different way. If you remember when we studied one of his screenplays way back, he will put in the action line, Eric and Ian, even if they're minor characters. And then when they come up as a character tag, he will just call them Eric and Ian. But this is how Aaron Sorkin does it. And this is what I love about this part of the podcast is we get to look exactly at how this screenwriter writes their screenplay. Sticking again with character tags, the unique formatting style that Sorkin uses is when everyone's talking at once, he puts all. This probably goes back to, like I've said, how the characters are always talking over each other. But in this case, we do see it quite a bit. Different groups, different times in the screenplay. If you want to see a good example of that, a good place to look is 16, 17, 18. This is, I don't really want to call it a montage, but this is a quick series of scenes where everyone around Harvard is starting to discover the Face Smash, the first website that Zuckerberg creates. And every time someone says, picking out a person that's the most attractive, God, this was so early 2000s, right? They would say, on the right or on the left, the person on the right is the hottest, the person on the left's the hottest. So it says all. And it's not just in one scene because we're going through the rapid scenes. So in each location, some people would handle that with the dual dialogue, but he actually does dual dialogue in a different way. Instead of having 2 columns of dual dialogue, at least in this screenplay, and I think also in Moneyball, the way he does it, is he uses the slash. So here on 73, you can see what I'm talking about, where you have DeVay and Tyler talking. They're talking at the same time. So the character tag is DeVay / Tyler, rather than giving them 2 separate columns. This is extra interesting because they're not saying the same thing. It's not like they're both saying amen or whatever. They're not saying the same thing. DeVay is saying BS, so Tyler's saying not to us. So he also indicates that in the dialogue by putting it back to back with a slash. This is one you would benefit from seeing rather than hearing if you're listening to the podcast. But it is something that Sorkin does, and maybe it goes back to his TV days where characters were talking all the time, all on top of each other. But it's easy to understand, and that's the main thing, is that when you read the screenplay, you can get it, and then that is consistent. We like to break down the use of bold and underlining and italics because that is something that can be used in so many different ways. In this screenplay, he uses it sparingly for sure. In fact, the bold he only uses it for titles. So, for example, on page 9, we get the title, Harvard University, Fall 2003. Then down on page 10, we start going through the night. He's going to show us throughout the night as this thing is taking place. So we get the title, 8:13 p.m. So as these things show up in the screenplay, we get a good look of the bold. In fact, at the very end of the screenplay, we'll go all the way down to the end here. We also have titles. You see there, title. And this is the sort of the biopic, like the story continues. They all live happily or unhappily ever after. So the title here says Cameron and Tyler receive a settlement of $65 million. Okay, so that's kind of happily ever after. And they signed a non-disclosure agreement, although apparently that was disclosed somehow since we know it. And as far as underlining, he's very old school. The only time you see it at all in the screenplay is during the dialogue when it's a specific word that he's trying to get across. This is the word that the character is hitting in this dialogue. Some actors appreciate that. Some actors don't like that. They want to discover that themselves, and that's fair. But Sorkin does it here. That's the only time in the screenplay that there's any underlining. And as far as italics, mostly it only shows up in the screenplay when someone's reading something, which is also very common. Although there are a couple of dialogue lines that are also in italics. I'm not sure why that is, but they were as well. And believe it or not, Sorkin did a little fancy drawing in his screenplay. If you look at page 15, 16 here, we get the equation that Eduardo wrote on the window that was used to sort the popularity of as they were picking who was the hottest. So that's pretty modern for our old school screenwriter. And let's talk about white space. How does this one look on the page? It's a mixture, you know. He does a great job throughout giving us a lot of white space with these really short action lines. In fact, there are sometimes pages and pages and pages of no action lines, which is pretty consistent with Sorkin's dialogue-heavy writing. But then when there's a scene that he really wants to describe, he will get in there and put a lot of paragraphs that are pretty thick. If you look at 124 and 125, this was when the twins are racing in the Olympic trials and they're talking to the prince. And it's a lot of information and a lot of 4 and a couple of 5-line paragraphs, which is no big deal, but they're back to back to back. So it's pretty dense. But even so, he breaks it up because he doesn't do his action lines as beats, as some screenwriters do, where every action line is a specific shot setup or beat. He's just telling a story, and he breaks up the paragraphs where it makes sense, both for flow and visually to keep you reading. And we see that here on 124 and 125. It's a lot of words, it's some thick paragraphs, but he's still breaking it up, hoping that we can easily get through that page. Going to pause here to just say how much I appreciate you watching and listening to this podcast.